So as we know, the dads are big dummies around the house gag is far from like a novel idea, but as a skilled comedian knows, it's not always like the subject that matters, it's how you talk about it that can like make or break a joke. And comic Nate Bargatze is as good as anyone at doing just that, kind of blending his very dry delivery with a refreshingly clean like brand of comedy. Does the Breadwinner manage to translate his popular comedy for the big screen, or is the humor lost in translation? I have seen it, so let's talk about it. Well, I will say right from the start, for maybe better or worse, I think Nate Bargatze's cinematic debut in The Breadwinner is pretty much exactly what you might expect. This is not necessarily a great movie, but I think as a low-key kind of throwback family drama, it is an amusing kind of cinematic extension of comedian Nate Bargatze's humor and vibe, providing some very like breezy entertainment and wholesome messages. As one of like the most influential comics in the world right now, the main draw in The Breadwinner is obviously Nate Bargatze himself. I personally find him to be pretty funny. And I know many other Christians have really like latched onto him due to his trademark like clean comedy that does swim kind of refreshingly upstream of the usual like vulgar or like shock jock tone in the comedy world. Now, for clean comedy to work, both the clean and the comedy need to be present. I think The Breadwinner mostly passes the test, but I think it does a better job at the first than the second, being more like a clean and wholesome drama than it is a hilarious comedy. During an opening like voiceover to this movie, Bargatze remarks, "This might sound a bit old-fashioned," and like in context, he's speaking about sort of the traditional family dynamic of a husband breadwinner and a stay-at-home mom, which is like a family structure the film eventually kind of challenges for a more modern understanding. But I think old-fashioned is maybe also just a good description for the film itself. The Breadwinner feels a bit like a Christian film made in like the 1990s, or if a sitcom like Full House had ever made like a theatrical feature film. And to be clear, I don't necessarily mean that as a bad thing. I think whether it's like a harsh criticism or a ringing endorsement may depend just on like the desires and expectations of the audience. And I do suspect that old-fashioned is exactly what many Christian audiences want. Not old-fashioned as in like outdated, but as like a nostalgic throwback to a simpler time and conservative values. And much of the film is exactly that, as both like a wholesome affirmation of family and a movie that is easily accessible for families. At the same time, I will say that some of the film's messages may be a bit kind of muddy or progressive for some viewers, which I'll get to in a bit more in just a moment. But like I said, to be clean is really only part of the equation, and like the absence of vulgarity doesn't automatically result in effective comedy. And I think my biggest problem with The Breadwinner is that despite featuring an often hilarious comic, the movie just isn't all that funny. Although this may partially just be a matter of taste and like how much or how little you just jive with sort of the comedic sensibilities of Bargatze himself. I think it is interesting that like during the film's closing credits, recordings of his various like standout routines are shown, revealing how like his jokes have been directly incorporated into the movie. And I did find that like a unique and just fascinating glimpse into like the adaptation process of taking jokes from the stage and translating them into a film. I think it also just highlights the synergy between the film and Bargatze's comedy. And as like an observational comic, Bargatze's strength in his stand-up routines is in his ability just to find like kind of hidden humor in the middle of relatable like everyday life, which as a side note feels even more relatable to me, as it turns out that this movie was filmed just like 10 minutes from my house, which was fun to see. And while some of like the events in the film's third act do elevate the spectacle and the stakes, such as like letting a horse loose inside of a house, many of the gags are built on just relatable family experiences, such as keeping up with laundry or cooking or just helping like emotional children navigate the challenges of growing up. And hearing Nate Bargatze do like a comedy set and find humor in these mundane life experiences can be hilarious, but actually like seeing those mundane experiences play out on screen is a bit more mundane, and so I don't think the humor always translates. The Breadwinner is not necessarily boring, but it's also just not always all that exciting. There was no like laughing out loud in my theater, and I can't really recall any just like standout moments that I'd be excited to revisit or to like watch along with someone who hasn't seen it yet. But I think basically all the funniest moments in this film are featured in the movie's marketing trailers. So I think how you feel about those is probably a good gauge for just how much you'll enjoy this film. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this, as you would hope from Nate Bargatze, this movie is as clean as his comedy. For language, there is no profanity, although there are a few uses of God. For violence, nothing for that. And sexuality, this is very clean as well, although there are just a couple very mild like innuendos. For example, Roofer remarks that his ex-wife left him a negative review, saying that his tools don't get the job done. As far as the themes, worldview, things going on beneath the surface, I think the central theme in The Breadwinner is all about like identity and where it's found. Because Nate Wilcox, who is Nate Bargatze's character, finds like most of his identity as like the best car salesman at his dealership. But he must like determine where his purpose and self-worth come from when he's required to stay at home with the kids, while his wife Katie, who is played by Mandy Moore, navigates like a similarly drastic transition from being a stay-at-home mom to a thriving businesswoman. And their three children in the film face similar challenges, struggling not to allow like external factors such as a school spelling bee or just cute boys to determine who they are. It's a wholesome message, and I think one that works really for any age demographic. The film ultimately suggests that identity must come from just the love and unity of a family, and I do particularly like that it shows the family navigate this challenge as a family. That being said, where the message does get a bit muddy, at least to me, is in like the nuances of how the film answers some of those questions. The film's tagline is "Let the Dad Era Begin," and the so-called Dad Era begins when Nate finally decides that like instead of trying to follow mom's more hardline, established like family organizational system, he instead needs to develop like a new system that works for him. And I will admit, as a dad myself, the Dad Era is actually pretty great. I think it requires the children to take on more responsibility while also emphasizing trust and like partnership rather than just like a rigid top-down kind of scheduling structure. I think while Nate's sort of ulterior motivations are ultimately selfish, as he lies and kind of desires to return to work, I think seeing him as like a actual stay-at-home dad rather than just a poor substitute mom is commendable. Unfortunately, the film seems to disagree, suggesting that the success of a stay-at-home dad is really in only how closely they can mimic mom. And his wife in this, Mandy Moore's character, kind of effortlessly moves from being a stay-at-home mom into a big-time business owner, while he is a bumbling disaster as a homemaker. And the film basically suggests that it's kind of seemingly easy to be a working dad and hard to be a domestic mom. I think it kind of falls into the trap that many Hollywood films do that struggles to be pro-woman, which is good, without necessarily being anti-man, which is not good. Now, I don't think The Breadwinner goes quite that far. This movie isn't anti-man, but I did feel that it does fail to just celebrate or show the strengths of dads and men. I think even just a few more moments of Nate kind of helping his wife with her own role reversal would have gone a long way, just showcasing sort of the complementary differences and the strengths within the family. All that to say, I think the basic themes and like message about family and identity is easy to affirm, even if some of like the specific applications I don't think work quite as well. So overall, The Breadwinner is fine as a film, and I do think that it probably will land well with this target audience. Still, and I know you shouldn't judge a movie by like what it's not, but I actually think it would have been great as like a sitcom show instead, as a sort of like real world Bluey, because I genuinely cared about the Wilcox family and would enjoy spending more time with them. I think the film's sort of low-key stakes and everyday family life vibe would translate perfectly to the small screen, while also giving Nate like an opportunity to showcase kind of more comedic range than this being a struggling Mr. Mom. Even so, fans of Bargatze and his brand of humor, or just audiences looking for some squeaky clean family entertainment, may find exactly what they're looking for here. It may not be a great film, but it is a hard movie to dislike. I think The Breadwinner has plenty of heart and charm to be endearing, and does provide enough sort of moderate chuckles to send audiences out of the theater with a smile. But hey, I would love to hear what you think if you're a big fan of Bargatze's comedy or just going into this fresh. Don't be shy. Jump into the comment section. Let's have a conversation on it. If you haven't done so too, encourage you guys, subscribe to the channel, become a collider. Got lots of other movie reviews, got our Faith and Pop Culture podcast, got interviews, just other fun stuff. Would love to have you guys be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.